What is more traumatic than people think? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Emotional invalidation as a child. It may seem like a small thing at the time, but later on you find out you have no vocabulary for describing what you're feeling, or you're not even sure you're feeling things at all. Answer. Just recently I realized that my parents didn't like my emotions, so I tried to live without them. My emotions, especially negative ones, were disregarded, not accepted. When I told my dad I'm sad, I'd hear I need to stop being sad, get a hold of myself, things will be better, and so on. I get that he's trying to help. Doesn't change the fact that he's not. When I'm agitated, I gesticulate more, and I've heard countless times, stop waving your hands. When my parents ask me about my day, I don't think about what I'm feeling, but rather what kind of answer is acceptable to them, and since they don't tend to accept my feelings, I focus on events. Also, I realized I've dug my anger deep down, and I don't connect with it well. I have situations where I know I should get angry, but I don't. Probably because I believe that it will bite me in the jerk eventually one way or another. But that way, I have issues defending my boundaries. And of course, my self-esteem sucks, but that's probably more complicated. Story 2. Realizing someone you deeply cared about only valued what you could do for them, not who you are as a person. That quiet kind of betrayal hits deeper than most people expect. Answer. I'm there right now. Friend has been in and out of the hospital since early April, and I bent over backwards taking care of her while in the hospital, care home, and even my own home. She's been out a week and I've not heard a word from her. I won't change who I am because of her, but it still hurts. I have to pay someone to be at my home if I'm away for even an hour, so it costs me a lot of money and time to sit with her every day, and I feel so unappreciated by her. I heard about an hour ago she's back in the hospital and I've tried calling, but she lets it go to voicemail. I should just be done with the friendship, but it's hard to let go. We are in our 70s, so we've known each other for almost 50 years, but I'm rethinking the friendship. I'm sad about it. Story 3. Having to distance yourself from your family to keep your own sanity. In other words, setting boundaries. Answer. I only recently went no contact with 2 of my sisters because I wouldn't do what they wanted. Grow plant substance, it's legal here, but they kept calling and telling me what to do, so I said no more. Gave them the plants fully grown, and then they accused me of taking half of it. Then proceeded to tell everyone I'm a spoiled brat, boomer, and only think of myself. Every day I feel a little bit happier with my choice. Story 4. Having a workaholic parent who's hardly ever home, and even when they do come home, they usually don't really want to spend time doing anything with you, like a shared hobby, or even just watching TV shows together so much as they're keeping an eye on you. Instills within you the notion that your time, your company, and your feelings are not worth prioritizing. Answer. Ugh, this. My mom only came home to drop me to school and to pick me up from school. Any and all other hours she worked overtime. I rarely saw my mom as a kid, and I was making myself dinner at 8 years old, staying home alone. My dad traveled a lot for work, but he wasn't a workaholic. He was working to literally feed me and keep a roof over my head because we were technically poor. But my mom's a nurse who back then made a lot of money but spent it on a stupid shoot, so my dad had to work more to compensate for all her spending. So I basically never saw either of my parents, and as an adult, I don't have a relationship with either one. My dad's dead, so one relationship is default Lowell. I have a very skewed view on family, and when I tell people I'm not close to my family, they are in shambles. But how can someone be your family when they were never there during your most prominent years? Like, I don't have a connection with them. Story 5. Having someone you love in agony begging you for help and there being nothing you can do to help them? Answer. I helped my husband and his mom take care of her mom, husband's grandmother, during her last few months, and I was overwhelmed by how helpless I felt and that there was nothing I could do to help ease her suffering. On one of her last days after she'd taken a bad turn for the worse, she asked me, "Why am I the way that I am?" It broke my heart. I nearly choked up, but I told her that what was happening to her is just what happens when you're getting ready to go home. And she nodded and told me that she was ready to go home. I don't know how I didn't burst into sobs right then, but I managed to keep it together until I was alone. She passed away a few days later. Story 6. Having an intruder in your home. It violates your fundamentally safe space. In my case, it wasn't even an intruder. It was my elderly downstairs tenant in my upstairs when I wasn't expecting him. It scared the fudge out of me, and I didn't feel safe in my home for months after. Answer. I was just talking about this. A few years ago, some teenagers from down the street walked into my home when I was alone and in the shower. Apparently, the glass door to the deck in the backyard wasn't locked, and they got in through that. I came out of the shower to 3 teenage boys just standing in my kitchen while I was in a bathrobe and far from my cell phone. I take my cell phone to the bathroom with me while I shower now. It was broad daylight, and they just walked in to see if they could without me noticing. Once we installed cameras, I had to teach myself not to obsess over the feed. Story 7. Gaslighting bullying. I question so much about who I am, other people's intent, my validity and skills at even daily tasks, and my general knowledge on basically everything now. I have an awesome therapist, though. Answer: absolutely. I was bullied in my first professional role by several senior staff members. They destroyed my networks, my career, and my self-esteem. I'm so far behind where I should be professionally, and my self-esteem has never recovered. I look back and wonder how I put up with it. One thing I remember is, like most abuse, it starts gradually and with small things that you can brush off or ignore. But they gradually ramped things up until my entire working existence, and a lot of my non-working existence, was dictated by it. And I think part of me felt like I deserved it, as both they and my organization tried to convince me. Part of me was just trying to survive, and the other part felt so trapped and without resources that I couldn't get out. I mean, how could I apply for other jobs and put myself forward as a great candidate when, due to my colleagues' bullying, undermining, and sabotage, I wasn't performing as expected? How could I survive if I resigned? I know it's not the same as domestic abuse, but there are elements that are similar, and the reasons why I stayed in that terrible workplace have commonalities with the really why someone stays in an abusive relationship. Story 8. Medical gaslighting. Doctors treating you like trash when you have chronic, terminal illnesses and get pissy when you try and advocate for yourself. Answer: I blame the opioid epidemic, namely the DEA, for trying so hard to keep it under control. A ton of people with chronic pain can't get prescribed life-changing medication because of how hard doctors get cracked down for it. So most clinicians are forced to wiggle their way out of prescribing such meds. This includes ADHD and sleeping medications. Funnily enough, most opiates sold on the street are all fake pills pressed with fentanyl that are produced in Mexico. Whether or not a doctor provides too many prescriptions doesn't change the fact that fake pills will still be sold on the street for a cheaper price. Story 9. Being sick with an invisible illness. I've spent months in a hospital bed. Surgery is scary when they wheel you into the cold, sterile, bright room. Story 10. Getting cheated on. Even though everyone knows it's traumatic, it's still even more traumatic than you can ever comprehend until it happens to you with someone you really love. Answer: absolutely. It's been over a decade since my ex-husband left me for a coworker. And even though we got along fine now, and even though I barely even remember what it was like to be in love with him or married to him, every now and then, something will trigger the memory of him telling me, and I'm a wreck. I told my therapist once that it was almost like PTSD, and she said, "It is PTSD." I said, "I thought that seemed more like something that happened to people in war zones or people like EMTs." She said, "Absolutely not. It can be from any event that's traumatic. And apart from that, it just does permanent damage to your ability to trust." I'm so grateful that I met an amazing man who went through the same thing and has been loving and patient and understanding while we worked through it together. Story 11. Saving someone's life. I remember saving my cousin from drowning like 15 years ago, and for years I would get anxious thinking, what if I couldn't save him? Story 12. Narcissistic abuse that slowly gets worse over the years. It's the kind of abuse that you don't notice at first until you just feel worthless. The more comfortable the person gets, the more you love them, the more they think they can get away with. The constant gaslighting, lying, and just mistreatment messes with your head pretty bad. Months after my breakup, and am still trying to build myself a mental state back up. Answer: amen, especially the ones or is you are most certain you'd spend the rest of your life with. It leaves you spending so much time trying not to go through what-ifs or memories, searching for any reasoning behind why, even hoping to find wrong you did just so you can justify them. In time, you do phase out of this to clearly see them for who they were, feeling secure and knowing you did right. There was nothing you could have done. Yet, it's almost worse understanding it was just loving the wrong person who exploited your vulnerability to them. Temporarily makes it harder to find closure in it. That same realization does help you further your way through the final stages of grief, though. It finally gives you purpose to stop wishing for rewinds or ways to change. It will soon have you regretting ever thinking that way. Out of pure respect, wanting better for yourself. You're just angry, disappointed in undeserved effort you gave them in yourself for letting them in, loving them. You do so until you not just realize, but can also accept the fact it wasn't your fault. No, you did nothing wrong to deserve it. Find comfort in knowing you're not alone. It happens to most the best of us, at least once. Most of all, find peace in knowing you did all you could. Lots of people go in our lives, most, if not all, for good reasoning we might not see at the time. I hope you truly are able to find peace while this. I can relate to this myself. I'll be sure to keep you in my prayers. Just hang in there. Keep pushing. You honestly might never completely heal from it or them, but eventually life will get back to normal. It will be easily manageable as something you only remember ever so often. Don't let it change you as a person. Don't allow it to break you before you can heal enough to live freely again. Story 13. Being given the gifted kid label as a kid because you could read at an early age and were good at pattern recognition, then end up struggling in college, university, or with your career because suddenly you need skills you never learned and become depressed. Answer. A lot of states still have specific criteria and educational requirements for teachers of gifted students. Ohio is one of them. My spouse is a high school teacher. I totally agree that this designation leaves kids in a position where they feel they already have that something and don't need to work at learning new content skills. I feel it was an odd disservice to me as well. I think people think of me now as a late bloomer, but it's like, nah, I believed early on that I was entitled to success as a GT kid, and that really stunted me. Story 14. Having a parent who made you feel like you had to earn their love and nothing you ever did was right. Story 15. Being abused as a child. Some of us never get over it, and I don't know how the others do to deal with it. Answer. Almost 30 and struggling with this really bad or in TBH. I'm learning that I've been abused a lot for being neurodivergent in an immigrant family. I was always the black sheep in everything, and I think a lot about how much being told I'm stupid, a child, a bum, etc. Getting physically abused has affected my ability to take good opportunities when they come my way. It's insane, BC. I recognize that I'm really good at my special interests. But BC, I lack any confidence. I will always downplay myself in professional settings due to the way I've been treated in the past. I'm so glad I'm learning these things, the BC. I know I'm not stupid. I just need to work with the way I process things. And that happens to be different than others. Story 16. Having someone die on your watch. Had a youth group retreat and a child drowned while we were at the pool, and we didn't even realize it until the evening. I can't shake it. Story 17. Being neurodivergent. It's one thing to not know how your brain works, but it's 10x worse when all the adults around you in your childhood have no clue how to handle you either. Answer. Feels 100x worse when all the adults around you in your adulthood have no clue how to handle you. Just gotta accept you'll never be treated as a person, have any level of freedom, or be happy. You stay inside and get punished for everything you do or don't do every day for decades, and then you die. I'm still furious at every person who told me to just be myself or that I can do anything I want when I grow up. Liars. I can't be myself or anyone else because both are wrong bad, and I can't be anything at all, let alone anything I want. Story 18. Losing a job unexpectedly can mess with your self-worth. Brush it off like it's normal, but it's a real trauma. Answer. I lost my job as a firefighter several years ago for something I didn't even take part in. Not to get into specifics, but it was even on the news. Unfortunately, I made firefighting my identity, and when I lost it, I lost part of myself too. I learned to never make something other than my close family my identity, and since have gotten a job at another department, but now I just consider it a paycheck to support the ones I love. Can't wait to retire, and I cringe when people say it's the best job in the world. Traumatized me even more than my military experience, which is a whole story in itself. Just remember the brotherhood that once swore they'd die beside you, they'll be too busy chasing overtime and promotions to remember yours. Your funeral will be a photo op. Your family will get a flag and a handshake, and then they'll be left to rot in grief while the department goes right back to business. Story 19. Being falsely accused of some fudge-up shoot edit. I don't mean someone just saying something about you. I mean someone making real legal accusations against you. And unlike many, no, I'm not angry or upset with them. I just wish they knew how much it hurt me and for how long. Answer. This is actually why I refuse to watch my niece and nephew anymore. I'm fat, bald, and wear glasses. My niece hit her edgy phase and thinks calling anyone and their grandma a pedo is hilarious. I used to watch them every other day because my sister was going through a nasty divorce until we were walking through a dollar store. And I had to grab my 5-year-old nephew from trying to grab something. Don't remember what. My niece decided to say, "Stop touching him, you pedo." around an entire store of strangers. Nothing happened, but I was furious. I told my sister, and she thought it was hilarious. Now she's pissed I refused to watch them for her. Story 20. Verbal and emotional abuse. I was in a previous relationship where emotional and verbal abuse were a problem, but not physical. I think most people see physical abuse as traumatic, but I still deal with mental health issues as a result of the abuse years ago. Answer: yes. For me, it's so hard because the overwhelming majority of it was unintentional. My parents weren't trying to be cruel. They lacked the emotional maturity or understanding of their own neurodivergence and mental health. They just did what they thought was best. I'll never ever forget the times that I'd try to bring up a simple criticism and get told that was fine. She was awful. I should call CPS and they'd come take me away to live with somebody else. Here, she'd even dial the number for me and would put the phone receiver in my hand as she began dialing. My relationship with my mom has gotten better because we both have grown and healed, but it was not a quick or easy fix, and in some ways makes it so much harder because talking about the bad stuff when I was a kid feels like I'm betraying the current person. Story 21. Watching your parents slowly get old. The little changes pile up, and one day you realize they're not as strong as they used to be. It messes with you more than you think. Answer: my dad has always been my Superman. He was strong, spry, and smart. He's 80 now and still very active for his age, but I'm seeing him slowing down, having aches and pains, and while he's still with it upstairs, it takes longer for him to process info or needs additional explanation. We lost my mom last year, and he was her primary caregiver for the 3 years of illness. It's like he kept up until her passing, and now he's letting go. IDK how to explain it, but he took care of mom with minimal help from us, her preference, with all of his energy, and now that she's gone, he's given himself permission to slow down. Sorry for the SALOL. I guess you hit a nerve with me on your post, and I needed to let it out. Story 22. Getting into a car accident. Doesn't have to be anything major, but I've been in two and am honestly not looking forward to learning how to drive. Answer: I had one 17 years ago. A driver fell asleep at the wheel and plowed head-on into me. I broke everything from the waist down and will have lifelong issues. My compensation was pathetic, but I'm here and alive. I thought this many years later I would have gotten over it a bit more. I've had multiple types of therapy to get past my PTSD symptoms over the years. I would highly recommend somatic therapy for anyone tackling trauma, by the way. Story 23. Emotional abuse. Most PPL think physical abuse is the worst thing that could happen. In my experience, emotional abuse hit way harder, is more intense. Specifically, BC people can't see the scars it leaves. It's more insidious, harder to identify, explain to others until it's really bad. I've experienced both. The emotional abuse has always been more painful than anything physical. Answer: honestly, I'd rather my parents have beat me with their fists than what they did. Nobody believed me until these last few years because they held up the facade so well and they blamed everything on us, the ADHD demon children. Now that the both of us have moved out and away, our mother has been venting out and about in public because we aren't there to abuse, spewing all sorts of dislike nonsense that's obviously not true, and people know it, saying things like her boyfriend made her quit her job. He's such a gold digger. I dislike him so much. If I ever get my hands on that boy, oh, what he'll do. He's dragging my girl into alcoholism and substances addiction. He's no good. She doesn't even look at me anymore. Screamed in the grocery store at his little sister who was working till 1. Adi, how can he be digging for my gold if he also made me lose my financial stream? Also, how can he be a gold digger if he waited until he found a stable FT job to move in? 2, I have never and will never do or not do something because someone says I should or shouldn't. The whole town knows that. The town themselves actually told me I should find somewhere where my talents are appreciated, and that was my wake-up call to realize the job I had fudge-sucked. 3, threats of physical violence against a very sweet boy. He's well known for being a sweetheart in this town, and he has a good standing family. 4, I am 21. I ran into her coming out of the liquor store. She asked what the event was, and I told her that my boyfriend and I wanted to have some Mike's Limes with our supper that night. I also smoke plant substance and have smoked plant substance for years before I got together with him. But no, that means he's drugging me. Gotcha. 5, why the fudge would I, meanie? So now people come up to me and apologize for not listening when I tried to say that something was seriously wrong with her. Nobody believed us even after we both attempted tragic end. For the same reason, her. She spun a narrative that we were the problem, and the town treated us as such. I'm still cleaning up after the emotional damage she caused me as a child, teen, and now adult. And now I have to clean up the damage she causes perfect strangers who are understandably shaken by witnessing one of her vents. If she would have beaten me, I could have proven it years and years ago, and she wouldn't be fist-fighting randos in the grocery line, silly that would get her arrested. Story 24. Being let go or fired from a job. Even if it's on good terms and it's due to something like downsizing or restructuring, you always sort of wonder why you weren't worth fighting for Andor, why your contributions didn't matter as much as you thought they did. I once had to continue to finish a contract for a final 2 months after I learned that they had replaced me. I had been there for years and had nothing but positive feedback and good performance reviews, but they were moving in a different direction with the position, and there was really nothing I could do about it other than grit my teeth and smile through meetings where they talked about future projects and other plans that included my replacement. It was rough. Having to show up and play nice and focus on doing my job for those final 2 months was actually harder than being let go to begin with. Answer: I once was fired from a job because I was the victim of a very elaborate social engineering plot. I got scammed and cost the company money, even though I gave them and the police enough information for them to retrieve all of the money. This gave me PTSD, and I am not just flippantly saying it. I know what PTSD is. I'm diagnosed with PTSD-C even before this job, from emotional neglect and abuse as a child and multiple separate incidents of SA, including a very clear-cut violent violation by someone I didn't know. It didn't cut as deep, but it's more insidious in some ways. SA affects close and intimate relationships more, I'd say. This work-related trauma made me question everything, made me skeptical and mistrustful of casual relationships and interactions, made me have difficulty with pretty much anything in the work environment, and made me lose any level of self-esteem. Story 25. Growing up undiagnosed with ADHD autism, many invisible disability. For the first 33 years of my life, I legitimately just thought I was dumber, weaker, and less worthy than every single person I'd ever met. Story 26. Being taught an unhealthy view of body image when you're young can lead to a lifetime of body dysmorphia and eating disorders. Answer: oh my gosh, thank you so much for mentioning this. I can tell you how much silent agony and anguish I constantly struggled with for years because of early, obviously unhealthy messages about body size, shape, and what is desirable or even acceptable. It wasn't until years later that I started recognizing that maybe, just maybe, my body and body type were fine, actually great. I was quite literally convinced that I would not have a chance to find someone who honestly found me attractive. I am not in any way exaggerating. I find out 25 years later that the guys in HS rated me best butt in class. I was trying to hide. I say all this to confirm that this one thing really did a number on my psychological development. I don't think I'm completely over it, even in my middle age, but I also care a lot less. I read a lot about how to talk about bodies in front of children to reduce to the greatest extent possible the chances that I might inadvertently say something that could be received by my child as a statement that their body is not acceptable. So far, so good. Story 27. Repeated failure. Yeah, sure. Let me just try again after my entire self-worth and confidence has been shattered. Story 28. Being stuck in a bad workplace. Even just those subtly terrible places that absorb all your time or have bad managers and frustrating coworkers and they treat you poorly or take advantage makes it hard to adapt when you leave or if you find a good boss. Story 29. Having to choose which parent will have custody of you. It is a terrible and heartbreaking thing to ask of a child. Story 30. Being gaslighted by someone you trusted. It's like your reality gets twisted, and that kind of emotional trauma sticks way longer than people expect. Story 31. Being bullied by kids while at the same time your dad's telling you, you no good, and you will never amount to nothing. Story 32. Being chronically disabled from birth. Forces you into bullying, familial resentment, neglect, and loneliness. And it's like a dagger always hanging over your head. You know it's coming down if not when. Your body fails you when you need it most. And if it's invisible, you get the worst sides of not being taken seriously because people think you look normal, but not actually being normal and being penalized for not being able to act like it. Story 33. Living paycheck to paycheck, counting every cent, not knowing if you'll have enough to get through next month or what you'll do if you don't have it. The stress is intense. Story 34. Depression. The way people treat you when you're suffering from chronic depression usually leads to even more depression because you start to feel like you're abnormal and a burden. Story 35. Getting stabbed a little bit. Didn't need surgery, just through steri strips, but fudge, someone tried to eliminate me at work and no one cares because you weren't really hurt. Meanie. Ask anyone you know that got just the tip of something they didn't want, how they felt about it. Story 36. Emotional and verbal abuse. Honestly, I'd rather just be hit. That emotional stuff is insidious. Really fudge up your mind. Story 37. IUD insertion pap smear. It's crazy how one bad trip to the gyno can impact you. We have to trust these doctors with something really intimate, and you'd be surprised how little they care about making you feel safe or even not trying to hurt you. Can you imagine that in 2025, offices aren't even screening for intimacy assault history before they jam a speculum into you? You can cramp for days after a bad pap, and IUD insertion can sometimes make you black out. Then after all that, you have a nurse or doctor telling you, you'll be fine. It's just another way women are trained to endure pain and not complain. Answer: I don't know how to not make this come off invalidating, but this sounds like awful training on their part. My gyno slowed my appointment way down for me and explained it all in a way I could understand. She narrated everything she was doing until my pap was done. She let me dress and undress alone. I have an extensive history of SA, and this was strongly considered by her. I hope you are able to find someone who is willing to be supportive. I haven't had an IUD, and the horror stories keep me from getting one. Story 38. Losing a sibling. Passing in general is hard, but something about losing a sibling hits different. I'm the only kid now, and once my parents are gone, I'll have no immediate family. Story 39. Losing a parent at a young age. Maybe people think it is, but I at least don't give myself enough credit for being strong enough to live through it every day. Story 40. Losing a pet. People expect sadness, but the grief hits like losing a family member and lingers quietly for years. Story 41. An infestation. Years later, and I still freak out over anything that looks remotely like a bug in my house. Lost everything I owned, and people still treated me like I was crazy for having breakdowns about it. Story 42. Surgery. Specifically emergency surgery, but all surgery too. Had an emergency oophorectomy, had an ovary removed in March. Simple procedure. But the recovery has been so much harder than I thought, and now I find myself scared every time I get a period cramp, wondering if it's happening again, if I'll lose my other ovary. Answer: I had my gallbladder removed last March, and it was awful. I had an allergic reaction to a medication they gave me right before knocking me, as in my mouth became very itchy. First sign of anaphylaxis for me. Turns out I'm allergic to chlorhexidine, the sanitizing prep they use. So, as I was recovering, I broke out in a horrible rash. Then I found out I'm also allergic to the surgical glue. All of my incision sites welled up, and I had to remove the glue myself at home a week later. I'm so traumatized by what was supposed to be an easy surgery. All of this happened after my horrifically traumatic C-section, where I delivered an infection at my incision site, and that reopened a week later in the middle of the night. I'm so fudged traumatized. Story 43. Working in healthcare. I'm a pediatrician, just your regular PCP pediatrician. I can go from sending a sick kid to the ER, to laughing about Paw Patrol, to filing a CPS report, to dealing with a tragic end teen, to congratulating parents on their newborn, to playing peek-a-book with a 15-month-old, to talking to a teen about positive STI results, to congratulating another on college acceptance. All while getting 5,000 messages on my chart and 2,000 refill requests and 1,000 referrals and 200 prior auths. It's so exhausting. Be kind to your doctors and nurses. Answer: I can't imagine the roller coaster of emotions. I sometimes wonder the same thing about therapists, how they may have a tearful older adult who's grieving loss in one session, and then the very next session, with no break in between, see a middle-aged adult who's in a good mood and cracking jokes, and then the next session after that, with no break in between, see a kid who's getting bullied in school and who doesn't want to talk. Story 44. Isaburasum. Disappointing your parents, failing yourself, being cheated on, neglect, autism, miscarriages, stillbirths, infertility, poverty, loud noises, bullying, lack of supportive people around you, being force-fed, especially if it's an edma you don't like, gynecologist visits, accidental injuries during intercourse, i.e. tearing, scarring, losing a job, losing a home when it's not your fault, losing a pet, being helpless when someone is begging for your help, especially a loved one, breaking a bone, being trapped inside the house, especially small and/or dark areas. Story 45. Having multiple teeth extracted for no reason, or just careless dentistry in general. At 29, I was told that I needed to have multiple 7 teeth extracted immediately in one sitting due to an emergency infection that was barely explained to me. The experience was so traumatic that I regularly have nightmares about my teeth now, and I start shaking uncontrollably during dental appointments. It turns out that this dentist had done this on numerous occasions, and it was due to how they could bill insurance for more. Only one tooth actually had to come out. I'm still dealing with the ramifications of that terrible day and can't afford to continue the work needed to fix it. Story 46. Shocked that childbirth hasn't been commented. All of the older women in my life thought I was being dramatic with my fears. Lo and behold, my little boy and I almost died last year after a perfectly uncomplicated pregnancy. Story 47. Teaching. Our poor kids aren't all right. Teachers either need more training in psychology and trauma, or we need more support staff who have this training. Story 48. Constant rejection. Whether from a job or relationships, each time you get rejected, it becomes so much harder to put yourself out there again. You become so fearful. Story 49. Not making an effort to make friends when you're 30. It's scary, actually. Consider yourself very blessed if you can count your friends with one hand and use all fingers. Story 50. Caregiving. I was the primary caregiver for my mom when we were blindsided by an early onset Alzheimer's diagnosis. I took care of her here at home for about 5 years until her needs eclipsed my abilities. The decision to put her into care was also traumatic. It's fudge rough and very isolating. Everyone is sympathetic, but no one helps. Story 51. Falling downstairs and breaking your leg, apparently. I now have flashbacks of falling down the stairs and visibly shake when I'm trying to do them. It's been 2 years now. Answer. I get it. I fell and broke my right ankle after stepping off a curb and losing my balance in January 2024. I was distracted because I was laughing at something my much taller male friend said, and I matched his pace while stepping off the curb. It took 54 weeks for me to make a full recovery. I'm nervous every time I step off of a curb now and don't know if I will ever be comfortable talking to someone while stepping off of a curb again. Isuno and Rini. Story 52. Goodness, reading through these comments and knowing I've experienced a lot of this makes me wonder how I'm even functioning. Well, barely functioning, but now I know why. Story 53. Tinnitus. The absolute panic of realizing you'll never hear silence again. It made me fall into a deep depression for more than 5 years. I've started to accept it now, but I still have days when I can do nothing else but cry when it gets too overwhelming. Story 54. Car crashes. They happen so often that they've become normalized, when in reality they're a god-awful thing to experience. I've been in both a minor and a major car crash. Even minor ones can shake the hell out of you, especially if you're not at fault, because it causes you to lose all trust in other people on the road. Cars feel like passing traps sometimes, TBH. Story 55. Losing a friend or loved one suddenly. Car accident, tragic end, takedown, or the loss of a child. You never truly recover. Story 56. Nasa Ritrum Wasternabetun. Masking every day. I'm autistic, at school and at home for several years, not being diagnosed, then getting diagnosed and having your parents refuse to believe it. And every time you act autistic, they give you the same talk over and over again. And it just wears you down and having meltdowns and burnouts. Not wanting to be autistic, wanting to be narcmo. Story 57. Growing up in a loud household, one where yelling is common, even if it's not for violent reasons or towards you. Story 58. Being the one child, middle at that, out of 5 that isn't intellectually disabled. I'm 46 and still having my needs primarily ignored while trying to seek maternal approval through helping my siblings. Because all of their trauma is what is focused on daily, and no one sees that this is traumatic for me. Pity party here. Story 59. Job seeking when it's not going well. It makes you so angry when you spend hours crafting the perfect application, only to get rejected by a bot. When you get left hanging for ages after an interview, only to get a form rejection email, it makes you feel like you don't matter. And when you've got years of experience, you can be made to feel old and out of touch because you're competing against graduates of a relevant degree that didn't exist when you were that age, and they'll work cheaper than you, so they get the job. You feel so stupid for not aggressively upskilling all along, and quickly start doubting you could do jobs that are actually well below your skill level because the robo-rejections have crushed your spirit. Plus the overwhelming fear that you won't be able to find a new job in time and suddenly won't be able to pay your mortgage. Story 60. Someone attempting tragic end because you broke up with them. People outside of the relationship think that because they didn't actually succeed, that it's fine. Logically, you know that it has more to do with them than it does with you, but you still bear a huge weight of responsibility for that person's choice. Story 61. Shaming your child or being aggressive about your child trying new foods if they're a picky eater. My parents tried to get me to eat whatever was on my plate and wouldn't offer me an alternative, and they would get so upset with me when I didn't want to try something new. It got to the point where they threatened to put a feeding tube in me because I wasn't eating what they were giving me, and I wasn't getting enough nutrition as a result. Eventually, they gave up and made food that I would eat. But these scare tactics had the unintended consequence of me having panic attacks if I go somewhere that doesn't have anything I know will eat on the menu. I usually avoid this by looking up the menu ahead of time or grabbing something before or after. I honestly think I would be more open to trying new foods if my monkey brain didn't think something bad would happen to me if I ended up not liking it. Obviously, you should try to help your child expand their palate, but you need to be patient and gentle with them. Whenever my younger cousins are having trouble trying new foods, I try to sit with them and help them work up the courage to take one bite. It would have meant the world to me if someone did that for me when I was their age. Story 62. Getting hacked or worse, having your internet identity compromised, stolen. 99.99 people I know will always say something like, I have nothing to hide. I don't care if a hacker enters my computer, there's nothing there to see. But once their social media get compromised, the experience is so traumatic that they suddenly feel unsafe everywhere they go. I've had client literally go crazy due to a hack. It took him 3 years to get better and stop being paranoid around devices such as computers, TVs, smartphones, headphones, microphones, cameras, etc. Story 63. When a family member cuts you out of their life, especially if you don't feel like it was justified. Story 64. Anorexia. Do you know how many times I got the joke, just eat a darn burger? So many times. Or how many comments I got on my body from people who had no place to comment. Folks don't understand. Your brain turns that burger into poison. You literally cannot force yourself to eat. Something horrible in the deepest part of your soul will not allow you to eat. And when you are 17 and you die, temporarily, of heart failure, that trauma sits with you for the rest of your life. So does the trauma of 6 months in a hospital ward trying to recover. Every time you look in the mirror, you see bones, hollow eyes. Every time you stand up, you pass out. Your hair falls out. You watch yourself die right in front of you, and you cannot save yourself once you're at a certain point. And then after another certain point, nobody else can help you. You just won't hear it until you face severe, life-altering consequences. People joke all the time about this disorder, but there is a reason it is classified as one of the most deadly mental health disorders out there. Story 65. Having a loved one with mental illness, having to make decisions that are best for you regarding that loved one, knowing they may be seen as selfish. My examples would be divorce, especially difficult since we have kids, and putting my child into residential facilities for a time when all other options had been unhelpful. Answer: that is so true. Fortunately, no kids were involved in our relationship. However, the constant worries you have and the necessity to learn how to make Desiccon saving you own mental health are hard. There were times I was constantly afraid that he is dead the next time I see him. I never felt so helpless as there was nothing I could do to help him. Story 66. Caring for a permanently disabled child that will live a full life. The parents break. Their life become nothing but caring for the child even as it becomes an adult. No career aspirations fulfilled. Everything centers around access to healthcare in case of an emergency. No future, no plans, just obligation. You even begin to resent your child for living. You become a shell. You come to be unsure you love your spouse because you do, or because you have to for the child. Life is this way until they die or you do. Story 67. Being bipolar. I can never trust if my happiness is real or if it's a sign of me about to go off into a manic episode. Story 68. Betrayal from somebody you cared about. It comes in many forms and is not always insidious or intended, but the damage it causes runs deep and persists in perpetuity without outside intervention. Story 69. Your own mental health issues can be traumatic to themselves, not just the trauma that brought them on. It took me too long to realize and accept that it's real that experience was almost as traumatizing as the first. Story 70. Feeling left out, excluded consistently for a significant period of time by people you have to be in close quarters with often. This has been something I've experienced heavily during 2 periods of my adult life, and both times, close family and friends told me I had changed significantly after. Those changes usually have to do with how outgoing, happy, and generally excited about life I am, all of those having decreased significantly in the after. Story 71. Interactions with the police, especially the insane ones who are armed to the teeth and have something to prove. Story 72. Having a toxic boss and working under extreme pressure. Seriously, that stuff sticks with you for so long. I'm surrounded by great people at a job that gives me freedom now, but I feel like at times I've been programmed to have self-doubt and anxiety. Story 73. Antidepressant failures. We push people to get professional help, but the truth is, for the majority of patients, it takes at least 1 or 2 failures to find a medication that improves their symptoms. Failure takes months of adjusting dosage and waiting around for the next appointment to adjust again or change the script. It took me 13 years to find a medication that helped, and after all of that, it took an extra 6 months of appeals with my insurance to get the medication paid for. It grinds down people's hope, and it affects people who are already low on hope to start with. Story 74. Feeling unwanted. It forever affects your relationships with other people and yourself. You can evolve above it, sure, but it still leaves a stain. Story 75. Saving someone's life. I kept a young man from jumping from a bridge about a month ago, and I can't escape so many random things and what-ifs about that night. Story 76. Gaslighting. It's extremely distressing to feel like you can't trust your own feelings. It makes you feel like you're going crazy. Story 77. Having a parent die younger than 40. My mother died when I was 15 from a tipsy driver. I'll forever feel those effects. Story 78. Chifurin. I was always the quiet kid. I never talked as a child during school, and it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I really started to understand why I was that way. When I was a kid, it seemed like everything I liked or did was used to bully me. I always got laughed at for being different. I basically shut down and stopped trying to talk and make friends because it wasn't worth it. I didn't start coming out of this till I got to college, and I had to learn how to be more socially educated, finally made friends that have my back and like me for me. I still catch myself thinking in old ways, but at least I know how to deal with it now. I spend most of my life afraid to show people the real me, and people really don't understand how deep the anger and pain runs. Story 79. Stillbirths, miscarriages. Since it's hard to get over it, then most people think, and sometimes they don't really recover from the situation. Story 80. Vulvodynia, interstitial cystitis, or any chronic urogenital condition. You can't talk about it like other people can talk about their problems because it's TMI or taboo. Story 81. 2020 fudged me up. I never got seriously sick or lost anyone close to me, but the state of anxiety I lived in during that time took years to wear off. I still feel like life never really got normal for me again. Story 82. Say as a child, growing up with a parent who is emotionally distant, constantly depressed and hating themselves, losing a best friend to substances, overdose, mental hospitals. Man, the list goes on. I'm healing slowly. Story 83. Oh boy, I've got a potentially triggering one. When you, as a female, are reduced down to a baby-making machine or incubator. When your only worth is seen based on your potential to procreate or be bred. When the unborn, or even non-existent unborn, matter more than your life, health, happiness, and right to your own freaking body. You matter less than a non-existent thing when you are given less rights than a corpse. Was recently denied sterilization surgery because you'll regret it someday. Nope. The person who was responsible for me being unable to get what I wanted, to have safety in my own darn body, only wants to make sure that the option of me making them some biological spawn to Google over isn't lost to them. They don't care about you. They care about your use for breeding. To be reduced to this is just so engaging, painful, and traumatizing on a level I can't put into words. Imagine if we regarded men like this. There'd be outrage at the dehumanization of a person to their genitals. Story 84. Being constantly out of place the moment other people joins in your little circle. Like literally you can just sit there and no one would look at talk to you. Story 85. Moving. I've moved twice in the last year and I'm moving again. It messes you up. I don't really consider myself as having a home. Story 86. Passing. There's no escaping the harrowing truth of it when you put someone you love in the ground. They take a piece of you with them. Story 87. Having elderly parents at a young age. My dad will never see me walk down the aisle or get to meet my future children. Story 88. Postpartum anxiety and depression. I had it so freaking bad after my second baby that I literally thought I was going to go insane and was very tragic but I kept pushing through every day. Now I'm 9-month PP and on 2 different medications and am so much better than I was. But it took a lot to get to this point. Story 89. People flirting with you as a joke. I'm 30 and still struggle with accepting that people actually like me and find me attractive. Story 90. Being cheated on. It seems people don't think it's that serious of a thing anymore. Almost a joke to cheat, But for some people, it leaves a permanent scar and gives you trust issues you never really get rid of. Story 91. Long-term unemployment and job searching. People just say no or ghost you and you don't even get to know why most times. Was my resume not clear? Were there too many applicants? Literally no feedback to help me even know what the issue is. Hey, carefully tweak your resume to maximize your keyword match, and that may take hours. But this way you might meet whatever the criteria are for a human to look at it, spending 710 seconds on it before rejecting you and giving you no reason. Also, recruiters and hiring managers love to tell you to follow up with a message on LinkedIn or via email. And hey, make it personal, and make sure it showcases you without being too long or being a resume. And make sure it shows that you're interested in their company and this role for really real reasons. And then send them this message that they requested and hear fudge nothing back. Not one person who said, if you're interested in working with us, send me a DM, has ever responded to those requested DMs. And even though you don't get a reason, after enough time, people will just assume there's some reason you haven't been hired and pass on you. It grinds you down and it drips a lot of resentment into you. Oh, but one more rule. Don't you ever let that resentment show in your LinkedIn posts, you jobless peasant. Story 92. Not having a safe space to truly be yourself without fear of repercussion. While it doesn't appear traumatic, it has a massive impact on how you carry yourself going forward. Story 93. The time period after a disaster where you have to survive. Everyone expects a disaster to be traumatic, but once it's over and you still have to find ways to provide the basics to yourself or dependents, that can be a stress level that you were never prepared for. Story 94. Being denied entry into a country, especially when they can't get you on another flight home until tomorrow morning. Story 95. Chronic but unpredictable pain, either constantly canceling plans and seeming like a selfish flake, or rarely making plans and seeming like an unlikable jerk. Not everyone assumes you're doing it on purpose for attention, but enough to that eventually you start to believe it whenever you're not in debilitating pain, and even then, sometimes. Never mind the mental exhaustion that comes with just constantly working through pain, while knowing it's probably never going to stop being like this. The self-contempt when some part of your brain buys into the other gaslighting that you're just being lazy and looking for excuses. Story 96. Second trimester miscarriages. I went into labor at 20 weeks and my daughter was born on my bathroom floor. Time helps, but it's a pretty life-altering thing. She had beautiful fingernails and toenails. She had a functioning pancreas. She was just small. Story 97. Childbirth. No, seriously, it's not just that it hurts. Whatever. Lots of things hurt. I was in labor for 24 hours with an extremely stuck baby. They did an emergency C-section, but I had been in labor for so long, the epidural wore off halfway through it. So I felt the C-section. I was wide awake. Then they couldn't get the bleeding to stop, and everyone ran around and panicked while they paged a better surgeon. It's not just a painful experience. Sometimes it turns into surgery while you are wide awake with no anesthetic. And that's a good outcome if you are familiar with the invention of the chainsaw. Story 98. Being cheated on. It's so easy to say you'd leave right away if it happened to you. I always said that. But cheaters can be very manipulative, and the very act of being cheated on is a major blow to your ego. Unless you've been through it before or have a really strong sense of self, it's easy to get trapped in the apologies and manipulation when you also feel lower than you've ever felt. Story 99. Adoption. I was adopted at birth and still got abandonment trauma. I was adopted either medical records. I was adopted into an educated middle-class family that abused me when I showed all the signs of autism and CPTSD. People tend to stop caring once the kid is in the hands of the new family, but we have a lot of issues after it. While some adoptions go excellent, there's always issues when you pass kids around like cabbages and hope for the best. I have a lot of thoughts on it, but it can be summed up by this. If you adopt a kid, they are not always going to be like you, and may come with a host of issues and trauma you have to figure out how to navigate, just like any parenting sitch. Answer: took too long to find this. Add the trauma of when you, as an adoptee, realize the trauma you have, and then your parents take it personally. If you're going to adopt, do your research, folks. I love that the person I'm replying to mentioned ideal adoptions, because yes, even those involve trauma. Think of adoption like an amputation. Sometimes it is absolutely needed, but even in the best of circumstances, you still come out of it missing an arm. Story 100. Being spanked as a child. I didn't think it fudged me up as much as it did until I was at work when my manager, having a bit of a shit show day, angrily slammed his desk drawer shut behind me unexpectedly. I jumped and felt the cold jolt of physical fear shoot through me, and I immediately tensed up my jerk. 30 years later, and that reaction was just instinctive. Story 101. Losing both parents. No one loves you as unconditionally as they did. You can't ask them for advice. You can't ever go back home again, because without them, your old home doesn't exist. I would give 5 years off my life to hug them one last time. Story 102. Having a child with incurable, life-limiting illness and disability. Watching your child struggle and not be able to fix it changes you to your core and traumatizes you with powerlessness. Story 103. Undiagnosed illness. I spent only 18 months searching for a diagnosis. Many people spend decades. It was a misery. I remember the time my surgeon said, "There is nothing more I can do. You need a neurologist." I was certain I was a goner. 6 months ago, I woke up one morning unable to get out of bed, zero strength. Like overnight, someone had thrown a switch and zapped all my strength. I was 28, fit, and otherwise healthy. I eventually got my diagnosis, an autoimmune disorder. But that not knowing was agony. I'm 52 now. Story 104. Realizing in your mid-50s that the way your mother treated you growing up was narcissistic. Now that she is in her late 70s and having dementia, there will be no healing. The trauma is real and hurts. You can have all the therapy you need, but still doesn't fix anything. Then getting diagnosed at the same time with ADHD, told I probably had it from a young age. All of this comes down heavy and hard. Story 105. Neglect. They think that because a kid's not hit or violation, that they should be fine. People joke about, did your mommy not hug you enough as a child to put you down for being whiny or getting upset by something? But they don't connect that for some people that really is the case. Or they'll talk about someone not being able to socialize correctly because they were literally kept in a bedroom besides for school and the extremely rare play date with the few friends they managed to acquire and literally never learned how to socialize, especially if they're an only child. Then after like 22 or 23, people stop wanting to tell you when you fudge up socially and they just leave instead, which just repeats the fudge cycle. Story 106. Neglect and emotional abuse. People love to throw around jokes saying, "Mommy didn't hug you enough, huh?" And "that girl has daddy issues," but it's way more serious and damaging than a vast majority recognize. Children growing up without support, emotional connection, and co-regulation become emotionally immature. Repressed adults who struggle to regulate, much less identify their emotions, and who struggle to connect to others and to themselves. Not to mention the immense struggles with self-esteem and personal identity that can arise from these situations, and the horrific side effects those carry. Not being beaten or essayed doesn't mean that someone's childhood wasn't traumatic or filled with silent abuse. Story 107. Watching a loved one die. It's not like the movies. Agonal breathing is scary to witness if you don't know what it is. Story 108. Going through a manic bipolar episode. When you snap back to reality, the memories of everything you said to people really stick with you in an unpleasant way. Story 109. Probably circumcision. Accurately described as male genital mutilation by definition, it's definitely traumatic for the infant, and the psychological effect of that, while not consciously remembered, most likely lingers in some way. Story 110. 4 years ago, after the military coup in Myanmar, I joined the resistance movement. Because of that, I was unjustly issued an arrest warrant and had to flee to a liberated area controlled by an ethnic armed group. I was the only woman in that remote mountain outpost, sleeping in a small cold shelter with 6 male soldiers. They never hurt me, but I went to bed terrified every night. Water was scarce, and I suffered from painful infections without access to proper medicine. What hurt the most wasn't just the physical suffering, but how people treated me afterward. Friends and relatives distanced themselves once they heard about the arrest warrant. I understand they feared for their own safety, but during my darkest times, not a single friend stood by me. I had sacrificed so much. I supported over 1,000 striking civil servants with food and health assistance, helped families of political prisoners and fallen revolutionaries. I never expected anything in return. But when I was at my lowest, even a few kind words would have meant the world. And no one was there. That kind of silence still hurts. Story 111. Being broke, not having money can tear you apart. The mental disturbance that comes with it is unmatched. Story 112. Solitude. During the pandemic, I was stuck in the apartment I rented alone for 2 months before I could go back to my family home. I genuinely couldn't speak with anyone for the entire day, except for a brief call with my sister or mother from time to time. I have never been the talkative kind of person, but goddamn, I would have given anything to talk with someone about anything for a minute during those 2 months. Story 113. Surgery you don't need that your parents give consent for. Not you. Usually if you're too young to give that consent or understand what the surgery is, why you need it. I didn't need a circumcision, but I got one at age 8 or 9. I didn't understand what it was or why I was getting it. But it took months of scarring and recovery in DRs and my mother obsessing over my genitals when I had never given them much thought prior. On top that, later in life, I'm starting to realize that the problems that made it be thought I had to get one came from not cleaning properly, which my parents never taught me how to do. I didn't even know that my male body part could be cleaned more than it was, or that there was anything under the foreskin. And you know, rather than teach a kid how to clean himself or tell him that it's even possible, let's just cut off a few inches of skin and not properly explain to him why. Fudge, sir that. Story 114. Sharing something traumatic, hoping for some support, only to be met with silence or being outright scolded for it. Story 115. I underestimated house fires. Waking up in the middle of the night, sweating thinking it's happening again, only to realize everything is fine. My house isn't on fire. That kept going on for years, nightmares, in which my house was on fire again. Waking up, checking the entire house, go back to sleep. Well, at least attempt to go back to sleep. A decade later, I still have those nightmares, but maybe once a year, I can live with that. Story 116. Losing a sense of identity. Like after a job loss or major move can be more traumatic than people often realize. Story 117. Losing a parent when you are relatively young. My mom was diagnosed when I was 28 and she died 13 months later. She missed my wedding and meeting my daughters. My husband also lost his mom at 59 as well, so our girls were born without either grandmother. I still feel the loss every day. Story 118. Physically, passing out, getting knocked out. In movies and TV, we see people pass out, get knocked out for minutes at a time when, in reality, anything beyond a few seconds is pretty much a guarantee to leave lasting damages. Mentally, any form of parental reprimand, especially withdrawal or denial of affection, a parent can quickly forget the no said in a moment of rage after the child did something stupid and asks is, "You still love me?" The child, however, will never forget this. Story 119. Being a child and losing, or even worse, having your parents sell a prized toy or stuffed animal. I had a couple trucks I played with, maybe a couple times, and barely ever looked at, but in my mind they were something I owned. Things I could do with as I pleased and at my leisure. Having those things, each with stability and control, is a rare luxury for a child of maybe 4 next years of age. One of my parental figures must have decided that I didn't use them much and wouldn't miss them, but I woke up that morning and walked outside to a garage sale and an old lady walking away with my trucks. Freeun. The silver lining was that she reassured my bawling little form that they'd be going to a good home, but man, that stung back then. Talk to your kids like they're little adults, because this kind of thing can and will stick with them for a long time, even if they seem to get over it easily. I also have some childhood stuffed animals that I've misplaced somewhere and miss them dearly. Come on, never underestimate the connections a child makes with the things you give them. I'm gay and probably won't have children, but all the same, I hope never to pay that kind of feeling of loss forward to any kid. Story 120. CPR. Especially when a person has a DNR and wants to pass peacefully, and the family revoke it and want them resuscitated. Violently cracking your 95-year-old grandma's ribs for what? Story 121. My mom forgetting who I was. She doesn't recognize me in person anymore. She knows she has a son, but I assume she thinks he's still 16. Chornanem 36. Fudge mental illnesses. Story 122. Getting scammed. People are like, oh, it's the victim's fault for falling for it. No, scams are fabricated specifically to be very believable. Not only that, but scammers often only target people who fall into less tech-savvy and/or more vulnerable demographics. Imagine if your friend gave you a cookie and you got sedated by that cookie and he did it so he could raid your house. If you blame yourself for trusting that friend, then you're too hard on yourself. And if others blame you, then they're assholes. Scammers bring depression and hardship to communities of which people can only imagine the pain of unless they've been taken advantage of themselves. The scammer probably needs the money. You have no way of knowing that. Of course, There are some scammers who are genuinely struggling to survive and are desperate for money, but the majority have a decent salary. Imagine a scammer who makes $60K a year scams you for everything in your bank. The first feelings you get are betrayal, embarrassment, guilt, and a lot of times depression. Apart from the mental assault, who knows? Maybe you get evicted. Maybe you were unemployed and can't get your money back. Maybe you had money saved for your kids and now they have no money for college. The possibilities extend. The bank will restore their funds. Scammers don't care about whether the bank covers the victims or not, and a huge amount of scammers actually scam in ways in which a bank can't get involved. Even in cases where banks can help, a lot of times they choose not to for various reasons. If someone thinks of a variety of best-case scenarios, they might say, well, what if the scam was only for $1? Or what if I'm unaffected by the scam? But the best-case scenario would obviously just be that you don't get scammed. Scammers and scams are a problem, and people still find ways to sympathize with, empathize with, and respect scammers somehow. It's kind of like if you empathized with a dog abuser because the dog barked too much. You empathize with a scammer because you don't fathom how much their scam hurt the victim. Story 123. Emotional psychological assault. Words can and do hurt people. Cyberbullying is a real problem and hurts children and adults. If we saw saying something mean, cruel, coercive, manipulative, or pressuring to others in the same way we see throwing a punch at them, this would be a different and better world. Also, you might find you are more persuasive, at least in the long run. In the short term, you might bully someone into agreeing with you, but that will just last until the next might makes right person comes along. Convince the enemy that they are wrong with civility. If you can't, disengage after stating your case. You will not win every argument, but you might give third parties, kids who are just learning about the world, a better chance at buying into your position. Story 124. Bed bugs. If you've lived through an experience with them, you know, I still have legit PTSD from it. Story 125. Being bullied by colleagues. Went through it multiple times, and today was also a bad day. It brings so much stress and tension. Story 126. A toxic work environment. It can be a daily torment, and you can be haunted by it for years after you have left. Story 127. Narcissistic abuse. My ex was a covert narcissist, and it was the most traumatic experience of my life. Then after he devalued me, he told me he never loved me and discarded me after being together for 4 years. They don't have empathy and can't take accountability for their actions. At least I'm not as naive as I once was. Story 128. Middle school, high school. People I used to go to school with was so reckless at the mouth and never cared about people's feelings, lacking emotional intelligence, and can make you feel like complete in different ways. Graduating high school was the best feeling, but as of now, I'm almost to my 30s and realize the toll it actually took on me that I never really knew before was an eye-opener for me. I used to be very depressed and didn't even realize the extent of my depression. I still have dreams to this day of me being in high school. Story 129. If you are excluded as a child or in general just because you are quiet or shy, and I'm not talking about self-exclusion. Story 130. Violation intimacy assault reporting to the police to receive zero justice, whether it was one time or multiple times, by one person or multiple people, whether it happened in one day or for years and years, whether or not you've told anyone right away or realized the severity of it years later, then telling your testament to those in power to do something about it. Just to be told 12 of our peers don't want to believe these kinds of things happen in their own backyard bullshit. It's like being told there has to be a dead body for them to do something. Tragic end from the distress also doesn't count. The victim shares would have to be takedown. In my opinion, violation is worse than takedown because it's like your soul was eliminated, yet you're forced to stay alive through it all. Our justice system is sick, desperately needs reform. I could speak about this for days.